Hey guys, we're going to talk about enhancing communication in our class today to reach some of our STEM goals. Before I get started, if you're wondering what I'm using to create this presentation, it's Prezi. It works a lot like Google Slides, but allows you to go a little more in depth and add different pictures in different ways. Alright, so back to communication. One of the hardest things to teach students is effective communication. We plan group activities because we know that's considered to be a best practice, but productive, meaningful communication seems really rare in our classrooms sometimes. Hopefully the following strategies will enhance the group's activities that you are currently doing by probing students to think critically and communicate those ideas. I've broken up the strategies down into some individual thinking strategies, small group, whole class, and then how do we achieve our ultimate goal of STEM certification by being STEM ambassadors. But like all strategies or skills, these must be practiced and they have to be part of our routine in order for us to get good at them. So the first one, the thinking strategy, is ladders of thinking, and it gives students the terminology to express their ideas and connect to others. We start with our assumption. Everybody, if something happens to you or you see something, you start with an assumption. And this starts with an emotional gut response to what is this? And it's always formed by our prior experiences. And these can be wrong or they can be misinformed. For example, in this picture, if you guys look at this, what do you think this guy's doing? Is he happy? Is he sad? Is he hurt? So actually there's a very mixed reaction on this picture. A lot of people thought he was hurt. A lot of people thought he was happy. He just, scored the winning goal. And a lot of people thought he was sad, like, oh man, I missed it. So we make an assumption, but what data do we use to inform that? And if you just take your assumption, then you have this very narrow picture of what happened. Kind of like in this, we don't have any of the fans to see, do we need to go back or if anything's different. So using ladders of thinking, after students have their assumption about what happened, and there may be multiple in the classroom, then we're going to prompt them to come back to their data. And what else could be there? What are we missing? What information do we need to know to make a better decision? What's here, and does it point multiple different ways, which is the best way to go? And if you teach ELA, you know that's a struggle. So then you come back, and after you have your assumption, you look at your data, and if your data is good, you can go back up to your assumption and say, is this good? Am I keeping this? And that's when we reach the conclusions phase of this. What's the best conclusion to draw? What did I think? And then how did I get to thinking that? Which we all know is kind of the whole writing an argument. Just a little different, still ladders of thinking though. And they ask, if you're asking kids what's missing or what else do I need to know, what best supports my conclusion and assumption, then you're getting into that critical thinking. It also gives the kids more to say. It's more well thought out. And of course, we always want them to be grounded in the data or the text. Once students have practiced critically thinking through something themselves, then we're ready to come to a small group. And small group strategies are excellent for ensuring students have a voice and are the best training ground for good communication skills. So the first strategy is the paper chat. And students, on a piece of paper, you write a thought-provoking question, or you put out some graph or chart or image that they're going to have to really decode. And then everybody has a different colored pencil or pen, and you get them to write. Nobody can talk, and they just have to write their responses. And you can set up parameters such as you must respond to at least 2 other group members, or you may not copy someone else's evidence or their data. And while students write, the color coding allows you to see who might be hogging the conversation, who's not talking, or who has a unique or creative take on things, who's thinking outside of the box. And then when you come out to whole group, you can take those ideas and say, hey, tell me about that. And it might be a student who normally doesn't want to speak out in class, but they have really great ideas. And if you kind of prompt them by saying they had a really great idea about this, then they might be more willing to elaborate on it knowing it's good already. They're not taking a risk of being shot down. The next strategy is the Foursquare strategy. We did a variation of this when we did STEM Day, where everybody has a different thing to research, and then you come back to the table and you have to actively listen in order to fill in your 4 squares. You can, kind of add a section in the center where they're supposed to summarize the information or bring all that information to a conclusion. But Ms. Coggins has actually modified this, and she does a 4 square the kids have a multiple choice question, and after they've answered it and worked it out, they separate into the four corners of the room to try to convince everyone that their answer is right. Before class, she kind of designates a mole who purposefully does the problem wrong with common mistakes a lot of kids make. But this just gives the kids something to argue against. It's something to say, well, maybe they are right, and it's something to flesh out to really make sure that they have those skills and understanding that they need. The last strategy is to observe and inform the kids on what they're doing. So set up stations and coach one small group through at a time. Of course, explicitly tell them what you want to see and hear, and then let them have a conversation, and then give them that feedback. And of course, if you let them do a quick write before, they're more likely to come in with some ideas already generated that they can refine versus, the first couple of minutes of everybody staring at each other awkwardly. But of course, if you will sit back and record or draw notes on what they're doing, then those kids who tend to get lost in a discussion, who are easily distracted, or who have some of those attention problems that we know about, they can come back, if they do get lost, they can come back to the board and find something to pick up on. And of course, make sure your body language is good, make sure that you're encouraging positive behaviors, and to help students know exactly what you like, remember to be really specific when you give feedback. Hey, I liked how you jumped in to add more support to so-and-so's argument. Or you disagreed with that person, but you did it really respectfully, and it really contributed to the conversation. So make sure your feedback is specific. Next, we have the whole class strategy. Once they're good in small group, you can kind of branch out a little bit. And to make whole group, I know some kids get lost in whole group discussions. To make it more engaging, try posting a look smart the day before so that kids can come with their thoughts collected. If you have an argumentative essay or something, maybe you do, the anticipation thing beforehand. Or maybe you say, we're going to be talking about waves tomorrow. If you can come in and tell me these things about sound waves, you'll get to look smart. A lot of times that's motivation for some kids. And don't forget about all the cool technology things we have to let kids flesh out their ideas first before they have to say them to the whole class. All right. So in whole group, if you'll teach kids to be tracers who follow conversations, and tracing a conversation is basically just showing someone that you were listening. So if you're tracing what your partner's saying, when my partner says this, it makes me think about that. So active listening again. Also, kids need to know how to help their team out. So if they miss something and they didn't quite hit the mark in the group discussion, or they're on your side of the argument, or they believe the same thing you do, if they don't have a slam dunk that time, of course, help them rebound. Add to that evidence. And also, if you don't know something, it embarrasses kids to not know the answer, to feel put on the spot. So how do I pass gracefully without slowing down the momentum of the discussion? And your part as the facilitator. Hopefully if we keep doing these things, hopefully we get really good at them. And hopefully we can, kind of sit back and just keep notes on the board, again, to anchor those kids back, so that they can reconnect if they get lost, if they come in late, and you can even take, with my 9th grade lit class, if they missed a day, I would always take a picture of what we did that day, and that way if we started to write about it, they could come back to that board, and they're free to talk, but I am actually keeping the notes up here. When they come back to write, they still have their notes. And then one of the hardest things is creatively weaving those off-topic comments back into the conversation, or rude comments, whatever you've got. There's probably nothing worse than being the class clown and making an inappropriate comment for laughs, and your teacher pretending that was a profound statement and weaving you back into the conversation and making you go back to the text, or making you go back to the graph or the chart and explain it, and making you a key player in this discussion. You'll probably get a lot further doing that than you will embarrassing the kid. So just act like they're all geniuses. Alright. And then last but not least, we want all of our kids to wind up being STEM ambassadors, so that when people come in for STEM certification or our administration, we want to coach that communication. And of course, we're not going to get good at it by not doing it and by not showing them how to do it. It can be a little overwhelming, but hopefully some of these have helped. And then ask about the kids' thinking. This is something we can do all the time to get them used to talking to adults and interacting with adults, because that's a little different than interacting with student group members. So what did you learn? What should you have learned while doing this? How did you get this answer? All of these are questions that prompt them to talk back through their thinking. And of course, we want to teach them the 4 C's vocabulary. I use critical thinking. I communicated with my group members. I collaborated with someone to do this. And this was creative because. Teach them to identify that in themselves, especially when you're giving them their feedback. That was creative, and this is why it was creative. I really liked how you collaborated and how you didn't take over the conversation, or, hey, you really stepped up your game this time. I heard you say 3 things during that conversation, and normally you're really quiet. I can tell you did the reading. So if you will choose a couple of these, or one of these even, to try out next week or in the coming weeks, and then to keep using. If one doesn't work for you, try another one. And if none of these work for you, ask somebody who's really good at getting their kids to work in groups. Ask them what they do. How do you make it work? And that's it for today. Thanks, guys.